Thank you very much for the opportunity this afternoon to share aspects of our research on water-related impacts of cover cropping in California. Our plan today is to first provide information from our group research throughout the Central Valley on water use of winter cover crops, and then to share research findings on related functions that cover crops perform as part of soil health management systems. And finally, to relate these considerations back to the context of SGMA. Our team consists of my colleagues, Drs. Alyssa DeVincentis, Daniele Zachariah, and Samuel Sandoval Solis. In addition, PhD candidate at Stanford University, Anna Gomes. In our efforts to develop information on what are widely called conservation or regenerative agriculture or soil health management systems over the last several years, investigating various roles that cover crops may have in these systems has been a big part of our work. And today, with my water science colleagues, we would like to share science-based information that is directly relevant to the considerations and determinations that you are making in the Madera County Groundwater Sustainability Agency. We look forward to your questions, but we ask that you hold them until after we have completed our allotted presentation time. And now Alyssa will start our discussion.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm going to start off with the main conclusions today, which we'll walk through one by one. The main message we want to share is very focused on winter cover crops. But even with that focus, there are significant differences between cover crop systems that we're going to go through. We'll go over these differences, but an important takeaway is that despite the system, our group's collective research shows that cover crops in California's Central Valley are generally not using water and can provide significant benefits to farms throughout California. First, I want to emphasize that we're talking about crops that grow during the winter season, which in California is the cool and wet season, if we're lucky, which it looks like we might be this year. This is a graph of the weather in Fresno, California, and I've highlighted the months of November to March when winter cover crops are grown in the off season between cash crops. Importantly, this time of year is when the temperature is lowest, resulting in the least evaporative demand. So although plants are growing, the weather conditions do not result in a lot of plant water use. The overwhelming majority of cover crop practices in California occur in this winter time period. So although we focused in on wintertime cover cropping, not all systems are created equal, and they shouldn't really be grouped together as one. Cover crop species can vary widely depending on a farmer's management goals and budget. So tall mixes of peas and oats can add substantial biomass to soil, while low-lying grasses can suppress weeds and maybe scavenge nitrogen. Additionally, we need to consider that cover crops can't be thought of just as a sole practice. They must be either tilled in or carefully managed in a no-till system, which will affect their water impact. This middle panel shows results from a long-term study over 20 years where cover crop and tillage systems were compared. So on the bottom axis, you have inches of water that were different between treatments. And you can see the biggest difference in blue all the way to the left is the difference when you have no cover crops with standard tillage compared to cover crops that are grown in a reduced till system. At the very top and bottom, you can see the same tillage systems are compared with one another with and without a cover crop, which results in actually the least differences in soil water. Lastly, management history needs to be considered when you're trying to calculate water use of a cover crop. So these results are from a study conducted near Solano County with 2 fields with very different management history, only a mile or so from one another. The light blue farm had been cover cropping for a decade, whereas the blue field was newly planted just for this experiment. You can see soil moisture increases as you go down the soil profile for the system that had already been cover cropping for several years. This shows us that long-term use of cover crops can have a significant water impact, and it takes time to accrue this benefit. And the long-term study that has been done by Jeff, he saw that it took up to 8 years to see the long-term water benefits of cover cropping. Although each of those factors will impact a cover crop's water use, they're generally not substantially water users, which is shown by these figures here. On the left, you have actual evapotranspiration data, which is rare in California, for an area that compares cover cropped and non-cover cropped fields. The differences are negligible, less than an inch of water, which is a small fraction in the scheme of annual water budgets in the Central Valley. The top and bottom graphs are comparing a field in Davis to a field in Five Points, which has obviously significantly different climate patterns. On the right, we looked at 10 fields and grouped them together into 3 different cover crop systems, which are on the bottom axis. We figured out when the soil was most saturated in the wintertime, and then calculated what fraction of that saturation was left at the end of the cover crop's life cycle. And you can see no statistical differences between the cover crop and control plots. I want to emphasize that these are all wintertime data. So we're talking about how much water the cover crop itself uses. And that's an important distinction because while they don't use a lot of water in the wintertime, they can offer significant year-round benefits, such as protecting the soil, improving water quality and quantity, as well as air quality, and creating habitat for beneficial insects and animals. And now Jeff is going to share some locally developed research that describes these benefits in detail.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alyssa. We also have, let's see, I've got that same problem with advancing the slides. All right. I mean, I will edit this out here, obviously, but not sure why that is. Okay, there it goes. That's a little bit surprising here. Okay. Thank you very much, Alyssa. We also have research evidence that cover cropping addresses several other overall water management issues in California Central Valley production systems. Just down the road from where you are up in Madera County, in the small town of Five Points, California, for instance, is one of North America's 124 long-term study sites across the North America, where soil health principles such as cover cropping and reduced disturbance tillage have been now evaluated in study sites for over 20 years. In our study in 5 Points, the persistent use of winter cover crops has added over 36 tons of organic matter, or 17 tons of carbon, to the soil system, and produced an average of about 2 tons of dry biomass per winter growing period. This organic matter has had very prominent impacts on soil function, as shown here, where you can see how the very important structure or aggregation of cover crop soil on the left is protected or increased relative to non-cover crop soils on the right. Now, these two aggregates or clods of soil are exactly the same soil type. They were managed over the last 22 years considerably differently, with the one on the left that is gradually, slowly taking water, filling its pores, or the one with cover crops, and the one on the right has not had cover crops over that period, and right before our eyes is disintegrating and disaggregating. Now, in areas that get more rainfall than we get down here in the central San Joaquin Valley, soils that are covered by winter cover crops are protected from this sort of disaggregation, surface crusting, and runoff. relative to bare soils. Our laboratory determinations of aggregate stability on the left indicate increases in soil stability class with cover crops and no tillage compared to the standard tillage system on the right. The bar graph on the right shows the actual time that water takes to infiltrate into the soil for 1, 2, 3, and 4 inches of applied water. And again, you can see the combination of no tillage and cover cropping with the 4 bars on the left side of that graph. Water is infiltrating considerably faster than it does in the standard tillage, no cover crop or bare soil system on the right. When cover crops, in addition to that, there are several indicators of biodiversity with greater diversity related to increased carbon, infiltration, and aggregation characteristics that result from cover cropping. So what you're seeing here are increases in soil macrofauna abundance, more large-scale visible organisms in the soil, again, related to the amount of carbon, the infiltration time, and the stability class that we just saw. When cover crops are left on the soil surface, they may act as a mulch, and our research, as well as considerable work from other areas, has shown that a reduction of about 4 inches of soil water evaporation can occur during a typical San Joaquin Valley summer growing period. That's about 13% of an estimated crop ET of 30 inches during that summer period. Lastly, considerable work with cover crops in the Salinas Valley very recently was used in advocating for cover crop nitrogen credits as part of their Ag Order 4.0 to the Central Coast Water Board. And if you can read with me that paragraph that's highlighted on the right side, their Ag Order now includes incentives for the use of compost, organic fertilizers, and cover crops to improve soil health, increase moisture retention, and carbon and nitrogen sequestration in the soil. The actual recommendation that this group of colleagues made to the water board there involves right here by the arrow. It's when cover crops have a carbon to nitrogen ratio of greater than 20, and that they're grown for at least 3 months during the winter rainy period, and that they achieve a soil or a dry shoot biomass of at least 4,500 pounds per acre, that there is low to no risk of nitrate leaching, and that farmers ought to receive a credit for this practice. Now, the mechanisms that are underlying our various assessments of water-related impacts of winter cover cropping are complex, but important aspects of them are shown here. What you have here on the left is a cover crop covered surface, and on the right, a bare exposed surface. Yes, there is going to be some measure of transpiration that occurs by the cover crop, but there are also going to be lower soil temperatures, an increase in soil biological activity, and something that is also often ignored or not noted is that in those cool morning periods in the wintertime, water may condense as dew on the leaf surfaces of the cover crop. And then when it warms up in the morning, that will become liquid and it may enter the soil via the roots there. And compared to non-cover crop soils, which also lose water via evaporation, and at times can have surface crusting and leading to sealing and runoff, based on our work, again, to reiterate the main takeaways that Alyssa presented earlier, we are emphasizing winter cover crops grown in that winter period. We mentioned that cover cropping is not an equal situation across the board. There are many variations on the theme of cover cropping. They tend to be generally not substantial water users, and that there are many significant long-term benefits that come with cover cropping. Growers, in conclusion here, can likely adopt winter cover cropping without needing to increase their irrigations. Now, over the recent years, we've been working with several farmers who are using cover crops in their production systems now to considerable advantage. The following short video shows two of them.
So my name is Justin Wiley. We're standing here in the Madera Ranchos, Madera, California, and we're on my pistachio ranch. So the main reasons for the cover crop, my number one goal is more long-term. Short-term, you know, you can, depending on the mix of cover crop, you do get a little bit of a nitrogen bonus. It helps with compaction. But the main reason for me with cover cropping is the coat of armor and the long-term benefits. What I'm trying to do out here is I'm transitioning this field to organic. I've reduced my inputs, I've reduced my nitrogen by over 90% annually. In the last couple of years, one of the years I did not use any nitrogen at all, only compost. And long-term, the cover crop acts as a shield, a coat of armor for the soil. And the purpose of that is to bring back the soil food web. So I'm trying to increase microbial activity in the soil. An issue with not having any protective armor on the soil is in the summer, the top few inches of the soil will heat up to something like 125, 140 degrees if you get into triple digits. Even a dead coat of armor, even a dead cover crop will keep the soil 20 to 30, 40 degrees cooler. We've actually witnessed that with a temperature gun where the live cover crop on the berms like I have here will be something in a 105 degree day will be something like 85 degrees. A terminated cover crop that is still coating the soil can be something in 105 degree heat might be something like 95 degrees. Bare soil in 105 degree heat, direct sunlight, all direct sunlight would be 140 degrees plus. So you can see major temperature swings if you don't have that coat of armor sitting on the soil. So that's one thing, is to improve the microbial activity in the soil. You know, earthworms, microarthropods, they cannot survive when the soil gets that hot. They're, you know, the earthworms are going to go deeper. Most of your microbial activity is either going to go dormant or die off in that kind of heat. So on top of that, you're not improving the soil structure, you're losing the glues, you're losing fungal activity, you actually get a drying effect, you know, a reverse osmosis effect where you're wicking the water out of the top few inches of the soil. So, you know, that ETO formula, you know, we haven't taken into consideration the fact that when we're irrigating, in between irrigations, if you go 4 or 5 days in between irrigation and it's 99 degrees or 105 degrees out, you're actually losing water to evaporation that a cover crop would actually help prevent. And so that's a credit there. Even though you are transpiring during that period of time, you're not evaporating nearly as much because your soil stays much cooler. And so that's something that we need to do more research on to see and to include that in this equation. So that's the first couple of things. The second thing is I'm trying to improve structure. So over a period of time when you have active growing roots in the soil, you are obviously feeding the microbes with different food sources, because the exudates from the plants are not just the trees, not just my pistachio trees, which feed one kind of microbial life, but I'm getting a mix of different plants that feed a variety of microbes, a variety of exudates. So I'm actually encouraging microbial growth in the soil over time as the microbial life cycles and I get more, you know, arthropods in it, microarthropods, earthworms, beetles, things like that. I'm gonna improve the structure of the soil. As the roots die back, I'm gonna leave gaps as the earthworms continue to process soil. I create more pores in my soil, macropores and micropores, where when the rain comes, if I have that soil structure and I've returned the glues to my soil from the fungal activity, the glomalin, I'm going to be able to retain a lot more water. And so on top of that, I'm also improving so not only the structure, I'm increasing soil organic matter. There's a lot of studies out there that show for every 1% increase in soil organic matter, you get 25,000 gallons of holding capacity in my soil. Right now, all of our soils in Madera are sitting at somewhere around 0.5% to 0.75%. I mean, we farm a lot of acreage around here, and we've taken those soil tests on everything we farm. We don't have anything above 0.75%. Now that could be native. If you take a sample on the fence line, it may not be much more than 1.5%, 2%, but we don't have to accept that. There is a way to improve soil organic matter. We've seen that in the Midwest. Not quite as arid of an environment, but we have trees, we have irrigation here. We have every reason to believe that we can improve our soil organic matter over the next 5-10 years. So long term, if I can increase the soil organic matter, that will improve my water holding capacity. When we have a wet year, having soil structure where I can take the water and the infiltration rate increases so that the water doesn't just wash down the canals, improving the soil organic matter in the soil should give me a huge increase in water holding capacity, to the point where on those wet years, if I get spring rains and winter rains and I start with a full profile, my full profile could be double or triple what my neighbor's is over time if I'm doing all those things. So the point is not just this year and what my cover crop might do in 1 year, it's what can it do in 5 or 10 years if I keep that coat of armor on my soil and I improve the soil structure, improve soil organic matter. What are the long-term benefits of that? So it's hard to look at, a cost-benefit analysis, or am I using more water over 1 year, especially in a drought year when my goals are long-term. So cover crops are an integral part of my operation. Without cover crops, I couldn't do anything else that I'm trying to do. So I'm trying to improve soil structure. I'm trying to improve water holding capacity and increase organic matter. Without that coat of armor on my soil, everything else I'm trying to do, with reducing salt applications in my fertilizer, with compost, with reducing nitrogen use, reducing inputs overall. I'm not applying any fungicides, insecticide, or herbicides in my blocks. Without that, without the cover crop, all the rest of the stuff goes away. Without a coat of armor on my soil, without the ability to cover crop and keep the coat of armor on my soil, everything else I'm trying to do goes away.